This is Raising the Bar, where my guests and I discuss business issues in Guyana. Today with me, I have a real estate agent, Selena Bacchus, and we're going to be discussing the renting business in Guyana. We're going to start off with where things currently are, what the status quo is, and some possible changes that, you know, perhaps my guests will put forward and I will put forward as well. All right. So, Selena, you just want to give a brief introduction in terms of what you have been doing professionally as a real estate agent, how long you've been in practice, anything else which is relevant to the discussion?
Of course. So I'm Selena Bacchus. My background is in sales and marketing, and I've been in real estate just about three, going on to my fourth year. I'm affiliated with Keller Williams Guyana. I have a few businesses that I also manage, but my primary source of income and business is real estate.
My name is Brenden Glasford. I'm a lawyer who has been practicing here in Guyana for just over a decade. I try to focus mainly on business, and I've started this discussion series to highlight some of the business issues in Guyana where things can be improved. Also, for people who are interested in getting involved in different types of business, some information so that at least it is a little less opaque when you're searching for types of business in Guyana, how you are doing that.
Yeah.
So we want to start off this discussion. We have some points which we'd like to discuss. And the first that we would like to start with is the type of rental markets there are in Guyana. So, obviously most people will be aware of the high end, right? Because that's usually what you see. Houses and apartments being rented for, it's usually quoted in USD, right?
Yes.
And for quite high prices. But tell us a bit about the other segments. I figure there's a low, there must be a medium, there might be some in between. So could you say a bit about that?
Of course. So, firstly, I love your content because I do follow you on TikTok. So, from starting a business to real estate things related, I think your content is awesome. But to answer your question, there are multiple ranges and multiple market segments, obviously, in the real estate industry. From the lower end of the tier, you have apartments, you have, believe it or not, there are people in Guyana who are finding houses in various parts for 30,000 Guyana dollars. And I'm always amazed when I hear people saying, well, I have this place, Costa Rica or somewhere on the West Bank, and I have this house for 30,000, but I'm looking for something closer in Georgetown. And I have to be the bearer of bad news and say, well, if you get an apartment, a one bedroom apartment for 60,000, then you might be extremely lucky. But there, again, like every market, there are different tiers. So there's a low income for persons who are working a minimum wage, and then we go up to the middle tier where we focus on professionals. It might be a working couple, where they have a combined salary of maybe 200 to 20. And then we have the high income. You have your managers, working Guyanese managers, that is earning the 500 salary. And then we move into the highest tier, which are the oil and gas. But then within the oil and gas, there again different segments. You have the subcontractors, you have the first tier, second tier oil and gas companies. So Exxon first tier, and then you have the other tiers that follow. Of course, Exxon is the most premier in terms of rental prices. You'll find them at the 7,000-8,000 bracket, 9,10. But they've taken a lot of houses, and then you have Schlumberger, who's below that, and they've also started to push prices a little bit. There's some sort of price cap that they've been working on initiating within the past year. But again, Guyana's market price is, if I have a property, a really nice property, this is my price. And I also know that there are quite a few oil and gas companies that are going to be vying for this. So I'm not done that negotiate. I don't negotiate that much on my price if I know that I'm the only house with a swimming pool in a place like Demerara Estates.
Okay. What is there an ultra low income bracket? Because I go to the market, especially on a Sunday, right? If you look, you're walking down the street the board is on. You look up left and right, you'll see about 10 Cubans, right, or 10 Spanish. Well, let's not assume 10 people of Spanish extraction,
Yes.
right? And speaking Spanish on those balconies of those buildings, right? And, I have seen houses, driving through places like Bel Air Park. You see not so prestigious houses that are now hosting Spanish individuals. So is there like an ultra low market where people are paying?
Generally, because those, especially those homeowners who have those properties, because they can get them easily rented, there isn't a need for a real estate agent. And most times, even if you approach them through our marketing efforts, they say plain right, my place can easily be rented. I don't need an agent. And it's fine because we understand demand and supply. And then for cases like that, it's a burden of responsibility when you are going to be like, if someone has a property and they are willing to take Latinos, then you have to take on the burden of responsibility to say, okay, well, this person is not going to damage your property because there's a stereotype that, hey, the Spanish will come and damage your property, which they may bring a higher number, but I found that's just because of the Spanish and their love for community. They like to be around each other. So if their friend or their family is coming over, they want to be in the same space. But that's something that Guyanese are thinking that, oh, it's a means of deception. Like they want to sign with 2 people and then they bring in 10. But generally, as an agent, myself and my team, we don't work with Spanish because again, you'll meet them and they'll be fantastic, but then the landlord wants you to take on that responsibility, and you can't futuristically see if this person will damage a property or not. People are very unpredictable. So I'd say for a large, at least my team, we generally don't work with properties that would be leasing to Spanish, nor would we have Spanish clients. But those places
Okay,
are
so
available, especially in Kitty. It's a
mhm.
hub. It is a hub. Alberton, Kitty, those are areas that you'll find a lot of those houses, but again, they don't use agents.
Okay. So you mentioned your clients, do you usually enter into, so for real estate transactions, if a person is planning to sell a vendor is going to get an agent, usually you enter into a listing agreement. So is there a written agency agreement that real estate agents usually enter into with the client?
100%. And I would advise that even agents that are not affiliated with a brokerage, that you have things written in paper. It's a way to secure yourself. I know persons rely on WhatsApp, but in the court of law, I have heard that WhatsApp is not the most reliable form of communication when you putting forward evidence. So we would advise emails if you don't have a signed agreement. The cases where some homeowners don't want to sign, and I will outright ask, well, why don't you want to sign? Are you doing something illegal? Because it's a means to protect me, but also it enforces my responsibilities to you as your agent to make sure that I'm doing these things for you. So I advise that my teams, we will rent properties once we have a listing agreement, because then we know we know that, one, we have to confirm that you are indeed the owner. Then we have to confirm that we have our monies secured. And then three, they have the well, they're getting a signature to say that we will do these things for your property and get you a client. And at the end of it, we will, of course, be paid for our service. This goes for both rentals and properties and lands for sale. And in Guyana, real estate agents, unfortunately, we really do have to fight for the monies that we work for.
There was a forum maybe 2 weeks back
Yes.
at Center for Local Business Development. I was there, and that seemed to be the general consensus with the people who were there, which is that the vendor, the seller, will usually try and find a way to stay. If you are the buyer, if you're acting for that party, generally may not want to pay the full amount. And this gets back to something that every service professional faces, right? Whether it's a lawyer, well, perhaps accountants to a lesser degree, but definitely from what you're saying, real estate agents, which is the problem with selling something that's not tangible, right? It is called selling the invisible, or the problem of selling the invisible. People don't understand the value or the work that goes into offering a service, right? Or why they should have to pay what they consider too much
Yeah.
to you, especially if you're a younger person, right? It seems that there is a bit of a hierarchical view that to make certain sums of money again, that you must be older, right? Why should you, a younger person, be able to benefit from sums that it might have taken years for the people that you probably be dealing with to accumulate?
Yeah.
Have you found these things to be the case?
Of course, we'll have persons who want to negotiate in commissions and things like that. Rentals is a little bit more straightforward, where it's agreed that you get your month's rent as commission. Again, they may try to delay that payment. They may run away from signing the listing agreement, which is the only kind of protection you have. And then there are people who outright don't pay because they know that the legal system, they can tie you up in court for a year or 2 years or many years actually, and then you won't have anything at the end of it. So, and then it's also going to cost you to go to court. So sometimes it's just cheaper to let that commission go rather than going to court and fighting them for 500,000. But once you have your, I would always advise agents, sign your documents, have your documents signed, and then there are persons who are audacious, even though you have your agreement signed, they're gonna pretend like they forgot, or they're gonna want to negotiate to the end of the at the end of the deal. So I think it's just knowing and recognizing a person's their little habits and their little characteristics and traits that you'll recognize if you're looking for it from the very onset, that you'll sort of be able to gauge whether a person is stingy, for lack of a better word, and if they'll want to play these games with you at the end of the transaction. So I think it's very important to learn how to read people and listen to them and see how they're acting, even when they're negotiating with the person who is essentially going to be taking their property. So that's just been my little ways of checking.
That's a very important tidbit for anybody who is going to be involved in a service business, right? Understanding that those small signs, the resistance
Yes.
to payment or to a formal agreement, right, can be red flags for service professionals that you might want to step back or step away from this transaction or or at least put it forefront of your mind that this transaction might be more problems for me than I initially anticipated.
I think any person who is I often talk about Guyanese not really knowing how to negotiate. Everybody knows this. In pricing, they like price it up here, which I really want this price so that you have that gap there. That's really for the negotiation process. But essentially you're coming back to what you really want. You just bumped up the price a little bit because you want the people to negotiate between that gap. And that's not what true negotiating is. It's like, okay, if I'm going to give you this, this is the value I want. And what are you willing now to work with me to make sure the deal is closed? And people are so focused on the price and the rental price or the sale price at the end of it, or how much money they're getting, that they forget that, hey, although the price is inflated in Guyana, you still need to offer value. And that's where, as an agent, you have to sit down and you have to educate your client. And because, like we were discussing earlier, that prices are so scattered in Guyana. There's no fixed price per square foot in Guyana. So now you've got to go and help these landlords or persons selling properties to see reason, because you want to get the most for your asset, as you should, but you also don't want to go and price your property exorbitantly in an already inflated market and then be unwilling to compromise on certain things. Like if it's not transferable.
What, not transferable
You know,
or
like people sell with the post. Do I say that?
yeah, the irrevocable. Yeah, well, it's something that's fairly well known that people use the irrevocable when there's a bar on transferring a property for a
Right.
certain amount of time. But let's not get any further
Yeah.
into it. But this is a good segue into the comparable pricing and the cost of renting in Guyana. Do you think that with the introduction of the oil and gas market, the high and ultra high luxury rental places that expats and other oil and gas workers are looking at, that landlords believe now that I should be able to get at least a certain amount of rent, even though their property might not meet the requirements to even be considered by oil and gas clients? Do you think that has caused that hyperinflation, right, or has caused these market segments to, or the landlords to believe that they can charge exorbitantly and get